Thank you so much for making the time to attend our second quarter ADOT-DBE Joint Task Force meeting. My name is Rebecca Morris. I'm the event planner and consultant for ADOT on the task force. And I do have just a couple things we're going to go through just to get it going. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 9:02 on Wednesday, June 1st. So I want to make sure we do put up this kind of notice to everybody. There is no discrimination. And this should be on pretty much everything ADOT communicates that we always put out there on behalf of ADOT. So that is my first kind of notice to share. And then we do have one other one kind of in our introductory comments I wanted to make sure everybody is aware of. So this is a flyer that was sent to us just to make sure we kind of start letting people know about opportunities. So this one is coming up. It is the I-17 Flex Lanes project. It is by Kiewit and FAN joint venture. There's some upcoming subcontracting opportunities. So here's a list of the trades that are coming up. This is kind of just a forward notice. So if you have any questions, they would like you to reach out. So the contact information is right here. I will drop a link to this flyer in the chat. It will also be included in the next DBE newsletter. So definitely keep an eye out for that. There's some great opportunities coming up for the I-17 Flex Lanes project. So with that, I will stop sharing and I would like to turn it over to Amy Barrett with ADOT to give us an update on the availability study.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to provide some information. The Arizona Department of Transportation has selected Keen Independent Research to conduct a DBE availability study, which analyzes the availability of disadvantaged business enterprises and other firms to perform in ADOT contracts. The study results will provide information for ADOT to adopt new overall DBE goals in 2023. The study launched in May of 2022, and in the summer of 2022, they will begin contacting businesses to collect information about their availability for different types of ADOT and local agency projects. Customer Research International will conduct these telephone surveys. ADOT will publish a draft availability study report and propose overall DBE goals for public comment by November 2022. To learn more about the 2023 ADOT availability study, Gabe Demery is a contract compliance and training officer, and he will be the contact. I will put his contact information in the chat as well as a website that you can keep an eye on to learn more information about this. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the availability study, but we just wanted to make you aware that this is beginning.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. All right, our next update from ADOT is coming from Matt Mall. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Sorry about that. I misplaced the Zoom link, and that's entirely my fault. Sorry.
Oh, hey, you're here. You're perfectly on time. It's like you got here and you can walk right on stage. So,
I'm like,
Matt, do you have any slides you need to share?
No, I don't.
Perfect. Well, Matt, go ahead and take it away. Give us an update from SEO.
Okay, so the first update I have is we've, since our last meeting, hired 3 or 4 possibly new district administrators in IDO. In the Southeast District, Todd Emery, he was a deputy state engineer for design, chose to relocate closer to he and his wife's family in the Safford Pima Valley area. So he's taken over as the district administrator for the Southeast District. In the Northwest District, Anthony Brozich used to be the assistant state construction engineer for IDO. He interviewed and was the successful applicant to take over the Northwest District. So he'll be up there. In the North Central District, we have Brennan Foley. He was an assistant district engineer in the North Central District. He applied and was selected to move up there to lead that district. And in the Southwest District, we have Bruce Finsky. He has taken over there. He was an assistant district engineer in that district as well. An important change is that these positions were recruited and hired as district administrators, which removes the requirement to be a registered professional engineer to lead an ADOT district to broaden our pool of applicants. You'll notice that all of those applicants happen to be engineers, which is coincidence. It was not a requirement for individuals to apply for those roles. We're really excited to have those 4 new leaders. I've been with ADOT for a very long time, and I don't remember 4 district positions turning over in such a short amount of time. Most of those were due to promotions within the department, so it's not like we had a mass exodus or anything like that. One other thing we're working on here at ADOT is investigating and looking at grant opportunities as a result of IIJA. A lot of that additional funding is competitive, so we will have to wait for the notice of funding opportunity to come out and then make, at least so far, very rapid decisions as an agency, whether we're going to apply for those grants, which projects are a good fit for those grants, and consider the match requirements. It's a broad range of match requirements for a lot of those. We continue to evaluate the impacts of IIJA and some of the new requirements that are part of that federal funding stream for our highway program. One of the large impact items that we're looking at now is Buy America has typically been applied to steel and steel products on our projects. The types of materials that are covered by Buy America have been vastly expanded as part of IIJA. We have what amounts to a 6-month grace period to adjust and adapt our systems and programs to implement those requirements, and we're actually participating in the review and comment period because obviously some materials may not be available in the quantities necessary to support our program from US suppliers. Those are the largest updates I have, Rebecca and Amy, everybody. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Those are really, really exciting. I think everybody is interested in the IIJA program, and kind of anything you can provide us, any updates or insights you can talk about there is much appreciated. So thank you so much. All right. I did not see Greg Riston on the line yet. Let me make sure.
I'll be covering for him.
You're Greg Riston today, as well as
Yes.
Cedric Johnson.
Indeed.
Cedric, thank you so much for logging in. Please do take it away and give us an update from ECS.
All righty. Okay, we have 2 new advertisements that hit the street yesterday, 2022-016 and 2022-020. First advertisement was yesterday. Second advertisement for those will be June 7th. I can't believe we're already in the month of June. Additionally, under upcoming advertisements, we have 4, 2022-014, 015, 018, and 2023-001. As yet, there's one that has a DBE goal of 0. That was 2022-014. The other 3 are to be determined. Other than that, looks like it's going to be a busy month, but I don't have anything further.
All right. Thank you, Cedric. We appreciate you taking the time, making
You're
those
welcome.
updates for us. All right. And do we have any other ADOT updates that we need to cover before we turn it over to our main presenter today? I almost want to say like speak now or forever hold your peace, but we have these meetings kind of frequently. So we definitely have a chance to hear from all of our ADOT representatives at the next one. So thank you to everybody who logged in and gave updates. I know it's really critical to be able to hear from ADOT representatives what's going on. So with that, we are here to hear from Misha Casebeer, president of MGT Tech Writing LLC, here to talk about how to winning tribal contract work. So Misha, thank you so much for taking the time. We're excited to hear what you have to say. And please do introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background and take it away.
Well, thank you. I'll introduce myself and pull up the share screen here. My name is Misha Casebeer. I am, as Rebecca said, president of MG Tech Writing LLC. I have been in business since July of 1993. And but before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that long before Anglo settlement in the region of what is now Clarkdale, the town of Clarkdale, Arizona, where I'm located, the land upon which my office is found once was the homeland to the Hohokam people, and today continues to be the home to the Yavapai Apache Nation tribal members. And today marks the realization I've had of a goal of presenting this material. Since October of 2019, I was discussing this with Michelle and Tom Fulcher in a hallway after the annual DBE and Small Business Conference that we had in Tucson. And so some of you know Tom and Michelle quite well and have schooled under them and have trained under them. But so today I'm really excited that we've come to this moment where we're having this discussion. And I hope a lot of you will come back next week for the workshop portion of this. We'll talk a little bit more about the workshop portion of this when we get to the end of this presentation. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to go real quickly through some of those slides because it is impossible in an hour or even several hours to teach you everything there is to know about working with tribal communities. But so this is kind of the 30,000-foot overview to get us started and to give you an introduction. But I want you to walk away with a starting place that anybody here can start and know, kind of how to make first contact, in a good way with tribes in terms of developing a relationship and begin to market to tribes. And so we're going to talk about strategies for that and a number of other things. So without further ado, I am going to continue. This is me several years ago at Newman Park Road outside of Flagstaff. Lovely day there. And so why might we want to work with tribes? And so if anybody has any thoughts they'd like to share in the chat, about why you think working with tribes is a great opportunity, go ahead and drop those in the chat. I'm just going to share a couple of reasons that I think it's really important to consider working with tribes and what some of the great benefits are. Tribal contracts offer very highly competitive hourly wages. And what's nice is they pay very quickly after you invoice them. I've never had to wait 90, 120 days for payment from a tribe, typically 10 and no more than 30 days after I invoice. If you perform well and develop a strong communicative relationship where both sides are benefiting, then there's numerous opportunities to win repeat work without always having to compete. You can win sole source contracts over time with them. And of course, there are 574 federally recognized tribes across the United States. So if, like me, this is something that you have a real passion about, there is a lot of opportunity, not just here within the state of Arizona, but across the United States with our tribes. Angela Booker has shared the ability to share and create opportunities with the tribes. And I think that's a great point because tribes are typically small representative governments that can really move and get things done. And so self-governance gives tribes the ability to look at things that aren't working for them and come up with very specific ways that are unique to them that serve them really well so that they can help their constituents. And they tend to have a consideration for how do we help the least among us. And so I like what Angela has shared there because working with tribes, you really get a lot of hands-on and an opportunity to make good impact for a whole community and a whole population at one time. And there's not just contract opportunities, there's lots of employment opportunities. We are in this time after the pandemic, and as the gentleman has shared with us this morning on these ADOT updates, there's a lot of turnover at this time. So there's real opportunity. And then the bipartisan infrastructure law, IIJA, gives us many other opportunities, particularly in transportation construction, and these kinds of fields. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't thought about working with tribes before, that it is a great opportunity and that there are numerous opportunities out there. And so despite having smaller opportunities, they're actually governments that have a very broad base of services that they offer. So they're not just governing themselves, but they're administering various businesses. So some examples you may not know are that tribes are becoming now, with CARES Act money and other monies from the federal government, they're starting to become their own internet service providers. Further, they have gas, electric, and utility provision, commercial gravel and construction operations, in addition to the more well-known gas stations, C-store, tourism, lodging that we traditionally see, and the gaming industries that we know well about. I wanted to talk then, though, about, you can use the features down below and raise your hand to indicate how many of you have historically worked with tribes and been either a prime contractor or a subcontractor to a tribal community. So go ahead and raise your hand and indicate if you have had an opportunity to work with tribes thus far, and that sort of thing. Great, so a number of you have, 5 different people, great, okay. And then, Rebecca, are you able to open people's mic if they want to make a comment, or do they just need to drop any comments into the chat?
Either way, ideally, the chat just works
Okay.
a little bit better. But yeah,
Okay.
if anybody really wants to, they can certainly raise their hand. And Misha, if you let me know who it is, I can definitely allow them to talk.
All right, that sounds great. Okay, so, it's not quite Christmas yet, but I'd like to hear from anybody in particular if there was something that you were hoping today to get out of this webinar. Is there a burning question or a burning challenge or something that you'd like to know? Go ahead and drop that in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that I address that over the course of this time, and or that we might, if we don't get to it today, address it when we have a longer period of time next Thursday. Okay, so Elizabeth Nelson has shared that they've not actually had a contract with the tribes, but ran into issue due to changes in their structure. And this has happened several times here in Nevada. And so that can be a situation, particularly after there's been a tribal election, where priorities change and personnel changes. And so that is something that we can discuss more at length next week. I guess I would say that keep trying to go back. If you haven't decided or concluded that you don't think it's a good situation, then sometimes try again works with tribes, because if they are in a moment after an election or some kind of shakeup internally, they may just need some time for the dust to settle, so to speak. Like we see with our federal administration, every time we have a change, it takes some time for them to get rolling again. So that may be what you've experienced. And unless you've been put off by something in that process, I would encourage you to reach out again, or maybe even reach out to different departments. Any other comments or things that people want to see, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm going to talk now about the handouts that Rebecca shared with you. Predominantly this handout on the left, 10 tips to respond to RFPs and still keep your sanity. This is very important, the sanity piece, because proposal writing does require a certain amount of time, and yet we're still faced with the challenge of managing our existing duties and our existing contracts while we're still working to win new work. So we'll talk about that work-life balance and how to approach proposal writing next week and make it manageable. But I love this document because it's short and sweet and gives some very good tips. We will talk more about this document on the right, this table that is published by the Federal Highway Administration, just came out in early May, the announcement of the Tribal Transportation Program Safety Funds grantees. And so I will describe this document in more detail, but if for some reason you did not receive this document and want to, that is the link below that you can go to. And not only is this particular list of grantees available at that website, but also past grantees from past grant cycles going back to, I believe, 2013 on that website. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about myths and misperceptions. We do see that, tragically in Buffalo, that situation was really fueled by a lot of misconceptions that people had about a certain population of people. And my goal here today is to help dispel any myths or misperceptions for you to not have a barrier to want to go after tribal contract work. And so does anybody want to drop in the chat some kind of a myth or misperception that they've seen other people have, that they'd like us to dispel? Are there things that you have seen as barriers to your own efforts at this? Dave Bamber, you have your hand up. Did you want to put something in the comment, or Rebecca, can you unmute him so he can ask his question?
Yep, sure did.
Dan, you want to go ahead? Did you want to address a myth or misconception we know about?
One of the concerns that I've heard repeatedly is just a guarantee that the payment will be in a timely manner. And because they're sovereign nations, I think there's typically sometimes a stereotype of, well, they'll do what they want. They'll pay if they want, so sometimes there's a fear of getting involved or going after a job.
I think that, well, I will say this, in 30 plus years of working with tribes, I've never had that experience. And I've worked, with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I've worked with tribes directly, I've worked with tribal organizations, and I've never had that experience. I would encourage you to come next week to the workshop where we're going to talk about contracts and subcontracts and negotiating tribal contracts. The other thing that I do is I try to learn as soon as I can in the process of working with a tribal nation about who's in the finance department. So not only am I sending my invoice to this department head or the person to whom I'm reporting on this project, I'm also sending it to somebody in finance. So it's going right to them at the same moment I'm submitting it to the department head with whom I'm working. And so I try to develop a relationship, not just with the department head and the folks with whom I'm working on a project, but also the people in finance. And developing that relationship has allowed me to keep things very timely. And, you kind of get stuck where if you have 30 days in your contract, then you can't really call and start bugging anybody until 30 days have passed. But once you hit 30 days, if you haven't yet seen payment, you can certainly start to call and just ask, politely, when will I see this payment? But I've never had to chase people in particular. And I've certainly not heard of anyone just not being paid. Okay, I'm going to proceed with a number of the slides, and we will take more questions at the end. There is a lot to get through. I do want to share about a concept that we hear a lot about, kind of going to what Dan has said about, the timing on payments, but there's this concept about, quote, Indian time. It's a concept that many people of color hear about how we process time versus, how larger society sees time. But I did want to share this link to this article that's 8 of the biggest misconceptions. I don't know that these are in particular 8 of the biggest misconceptions, but I thought it was well written. Joey Clift is a Native American person who talks about some of the microaggressions and things in the things that people say when they are misled or misinformed or that sort of thing. And that's what we want to prevent, is we want to be as well informed as we can and as sensitive and empathetic as we can. And that can get us past a lot of these things. But one of the things we hear a lot is about Indian time. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is, again, I've not experienced this issue of non-payment or delayed payments, but from the perspective of tribal nations, being chronically late is disrespectful. And so I like this quote from Thomas Stillday of the Red Lake Nation in Minnesota. Indian time means that we will do your ceremony until it's done, no matter how long it takes, with no shortcuts. It's not an excuse to be late or lazy. And so in that same vein with the ceremonies, what we have to understand about Native communities is they're very holistic, and their thinking is very holistic. And so in Western society, we're very linear, where the holistic thinking in Native American communities is more based around circular kinds of thinking, and that we're not necessarily going to an endpoint, we are working on a continuum. And so with that thinking in mind, something that may seem to you like it's an easy or quick decision, in the Iroquois Confederacy, they have a phrase about what is the impact to the seventh generation. So that doesn't mean that every decision that's being made on whether to hire you, whether to issue an RFP, what the deadline on that RFP should be, or when we're going to do this environmental assessment, you know, all those considerations, they're not asking on every single decision necessarily, what's the impact to the seventh generation, but what might help you in your work with them if you feel like things are moving more slowly, is to understand that the decision-making process isn't really linear, and there are many more considerations, and oftentimes influenced by the history of relationships they've had either with past contractors or with the federal government. So another misperception is that, you know, tribal nations are these hotbeds of COVID. Certainly early in the pandemic, we had a lot of devastation to our tribal nations. In the scheme of things overall, when we look back at this 20 years down the road, this has been devastating to tribes. That being said, because they are small, closed societies who work one-to-one with the federal government, and therefore the CDC, the National Indian Health Board, and the Indian Health Service hospitals and clinics that you find in tribal communities, they were able to respond very quickly with mask mandates, with masking procedures, and really not from a political perspective, from a protective perspective of how do we keep our tribal nation going, and particularly with a concern to the tribal elders. In tribal communities, the tribal elders are a precious resource because they are the keepers of history, language, culture, these oral histories that are not available in any kind of written or digital form. And so it's one of the reasons that they got very serious very quickly about addressing the pandemic and tried not to be very political about it. That being said, you know, when vaccines became available, tribal nations opened up their vaccine sites, many of them drive-through, and people were coming from out of state here to Arizona to tribal nations to get their vaccines when their home communities didn't even have them. So I want to just say that, you know, I've traveled recently to Alaska. I'll be traveling to the East Coast in another 2 weeks. When I sit in rooms with Native Americans, which I did last year, a very large room in Montana, I feel very safe. Their masking compliance is high. You know, and just like everywhere, there's some hesitancy about vaccines among certain groups of people, but in general, they're very safe. And I actually feel safer in those rooms than I do sometimes going to the grocery store right here, where it's been so controversial about how we address this pandemic. So one of their perspectives on this idea is something to understand because it's how they relate in general to each other and to the work that they do. And so the National Indian Health Board has this campaign to try to promote masking called Active Love. And you can actually get a free Active Love mask, like pictured here on the slide, and then take a selfie of yourself and send it in to them at that hashtag Active Love and indicate why your mask wearing is an act of love and why it's important to you. So Indium preference is something else that is often misunderstood and is something that you'll see a lot of times in the language of tribal RFPs and or tribal job announcements. And so it's important to dispel any misconceptions about this. So the first thing to understand is that this hiring policy does not mean that as a non-tribal member or non-Indian, you have no hope of being awarded employment opportunities or tribal contracts. I've been winning work with tribes for 30 years. And Indium Preference has been on most of the documents I have seen advertising these kinds of opportunities. But we want to understand the history here. Indian preference law and Indian preference policies have evolved from the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. And so these policies, just like the DBE program, were put in place to level the playing field for Native Americans trying to seek employment. And so Congress' intent with the passage of this law was to facilitate Indian self-government. Everything in working with tribes comes back to this concept of preserving Indian self-government. And so the Supreme Court holds that the Indian preference law doesn't constitute any kind of harmful racial discrimination, and it doesn't violate that due process clause in the Fifth Amendment, but is reasonable and rationally designed, again, to further Indian self-governance. And then finally, it's a distinct statute, so it doesn't violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so how might your firm work or win work when there's Indian preference in place? If you have any ideas you want to share, you can drop those in the chat. Has anyone dealt with this issue in particular, found a way around this issue? I don't look at this as a barrier because I have figured out different strategies. So one of the things that I do when I write proposals in response to RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, is I stress my DBE status, because that's how I have worked to level the playing field for myself as a firm. And that indicates to them that I have some disadvantaged status too. So stress that status. I like what Angela Booker has said, joint ventures will work. Further, be sure that when you write proposals or when you have interviews for the opportunity to win work, you've turned your proposal in now it's time to interview and sit down with some people and win this work face to face. Stress this tribal work that you might have done, or if you've not done any tribal contract work, stress the rural work that you've done. Now, I don't like to equate rural and tribal work. They are very different spheres, but tribal communities are often very remote locations and located in rural areas. So there are some overlaps. The other thing you can do is talk about, if you haven't done rural work or you haven't done tribal work that you've done with communities of color. Maybe Latinx communities, maybe African-American communities, maybe Asian Pacific communities, and or with subs or primes who are primes or subs of color. And so then that allows folks to see that you do have experience in working with people of color and can be very competent in your work with tribal communities. So the book at Write is, there's a lot of books out now, and I really encourage you to get on Amazon, and you know how Amazon will suggest other titles to you once you've listed a title. Look for things that are written by Native Americans. Anton Truer is a Native American. I love the title of this, and it's a short book, and it's just like reading a facts page. It has a question and then it provides the answer, and it talks about everything from Indian law to why do Native Americans have long hair to tell me about ceremonies and powwows. So this is the link to where you can find it on Amazon. It is not an expensive book. It is a pretty quick read. And it's something that I keep and pick up from time to time when I just want to remind myself in a very brief fashion quickly about a concept. Sonia, we will be talking very soon as we continue this discussion about how we find these contract opportunities. I'm going to go through that in great detail here shortly. So I wanted to share this, going back to this idea of holistic thinking in tribal communities. Black Elk Oglala Sioux said this many, many years ago. You have noticed that everything an Indian does is in a circle. And that because the power of the world always works in circles, everything tries to be round. And so, you know, thinking about that ideology, that we're not just moving to point B in a situation, we are trying to move to another place on a continuum, can help you deal with timelines working with tribes, and that you may not find, you know, other than when you finish the grant funded project and you have to turn in this report and whatnot and close out this budget, that there's an actual endpoint. And I love that, because that is the starting place of having a continuing relationship where you get ongoing work. Is we haven't finished with your safety plan. Now let's write some grants to get you the money to build these roadways and things that we've recommended in your safety plan. Now we've done the EA. Let's do the next work. Let's do the phase 2 grant writing that we need to do to get the money to do the planning and design. Let's do the next phase 3 grant so that we can build this thing. And so this circle concept is something that you can use to stay employed with people and tribal nations. And so we talk about this concept of them being sovereign nations, but what does it really mean? And so, you know, it's not my intent to fill you up with a whole bunch of legalese and legal law. And there is a lot of reading you can do. Title 25 guides Indian law across the United States. But there's some basic things to understand about the law. And so I'll share those very basic things. Tribal sovereignty ensures that any decision about the tribes with regard to their property and citizens are made with their participation and consent. And then further, for example, tribes have the option of being direct recipients of federal funds, in addition to the option of receiving federal funds as recipients of their state when awarded Section 5311 and Section 53 transit grants, as well as some other federal or state grants. So it's just an example. There is the tribal transit program. And so tribes can go direct to the federal government and apply for those funds to do tribal transit program startup, to buy buses, to improve bus facilities, build bus stops, and all that kind of thing. But there's also money available through ADOT, through these programs for transit funding. The difference being that when you apply to the state, you have to come up with a match. When you apply to the feds, you don't. Now that changes on different grant programs. And it's just one example of how sovereignty can work. But there are many numerous examples. And we can talk a lot more about that next week in the workshop, or I encourage you to do some reading about tribal sovereignty. So this particular document is a guidebook for transit, for developing tribal transit, and it was developed by the Transportation Research Board's Transit Cooperative Research Program. So this is report 154. And it's actually developing, enhancing, and sustaining tribal transit services. But you see, I just pulled out 3 pages here that have an in-depth discussion of tribal sovereignty. And here's the link if you just want to go and read a really good, comprehensive, tight description of tribal sovereignty, not necessarily about transit, but just so that you have an understanding. This page is a lovely page from the Department of the Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so this is a facts page, and you can see there's many questions here. What are Indian treaty rights? What's the legal status of American Indian and Alaska Native tribes? The question about sovereignty is on this page. How is federal recognition status conferred upon groups of people that want to declare themselves tribes? Much information that you would like to learn about the legal aspects and Indian law can be found on this page. And so, you know, straight from the federal government, you know, with the approval through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, this information is made public. So I was asked by ADOT to talk about tribal employment rights offices. That being said, I want to make the caveat that not every tribe has a TARO office. We call them TARO, and it stands for Tribal Employment Rights Office or Tribal Employment Rights ordinance. And now this can get very rapidly down into the weeds. And so I'm not going to go on and on about this, except to say that if you are going to contract with a tribe, you may be asked to reach out to their TARA office and to learn about that. This Council for Tribal Employment Rights has some very generalized facts at this website that I'm sharing. So you can learn in general how TARA should operate across tribal nations. But if you take a look at some different websites, they will show you what their forms might be. Now, not all tribes, as I said, have TARA offices or require you to comply with the TARA ordinance when you're doing work for them. In this 30 plus years of work I've been doing for tribes, there's a tribe in Nevada with which I'm working. This is the first time I've had to deal with TARA in all these many years. And each tribe approaches it a little bit differently. Some require the filling out of paperwork. Some require a proportion of the contract be paid. It just depends on the tribe. And so you want to get familiar with each tribe's TARA office if in fact it exists. And so I'm just going to click through real quickly. Tulalip tribes have a nice TARA web page. So if you look at these other web pages and are somewhat confused, you can look at Tulalip, even if you don't want to work with them because they're quite a bit of distance from our state. But this is the link where you can find their TARA information. The TARA information that's on the Tohono O'odham Nation's website is very nice. Tohono O'odham Nation, of course, about 60 to 80 miles west of Tucson in southern Arizona. I've worked with them on numerous different projects, Safe Routes to School, and a number of things over the years. They have a great web page for their TARA office and has contractor information and also TARA job announcements. So you might take a look at that. This is the website there. Most important thing to remember, as I've already talked about, is that every tribe is unique. So this is a map that you can find on the Intertribal Council of Arizona's website. They have many maps, so you can take a look at where tribal lands are in Arizona. We have 22 federally recognized tribes in our state and 20 Indian reservations. That's a land base of 27.1% of the state's total land base. And so 8 tribes within our state have land in 2 or more counties. So that's a real opportunity for you because, you know, you are, based on where you are in Arizona, you are probably adjacent to or close to some tribal nation. And so there's an opportunity for you. Hualapai Indian Tribe, Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians, Navajo Nation, Hopi Tribe, White Mountain Apache, San Carlos Apache, Tohono O'odham Nation, and Gila River Indian Tribe all have lands in 2+ communities. Now, this map may have changed since we've had congressional redistricting, but this is the most current that I could find, again, on the ITCA's website, but just shows the overlap between tribal lands and where our Arizona congressional districts are. And then some additional facts. Arizona's American Indian Alaskan Native population, which that language is what the Census Department and the federal government typically uses. And that's the language you'll often see in research documents, American Indian as opposed to Native American. That population is 6% of our state's total population here. 13 of Arizona's counties have tribal nations in their midst. And this resource at this bit.ly link, again, like that facts page that the BIA has published, has many different articles and information that you can find to learn more about Native American history and other things that you may want to know about Indian law, different resources, different organizations. It's an excellent, excellent website. Here in Arizona, this is a great starting place. So now we are going to begin talking about how do you find this work? Where do you find listings for these contracts and whatnot? And so what I want to talk about is you developing a strategy that is unique to your firm, whereby you go and look for this information, but you figured out a strategy that works for you. So starting with looking at where tribes are versus where you are, and then learning about the tribes, the kind of enterprises they have, the kinds of construction projects or things that they're doing, the kinds of federal grants they're winning to put projects on the ground. And so this webpage is a one-stop shop for all these tribal nations across this state. So this is the Intertribal Council of Arizona, and they have 21 of our 22 nations as members of ITCA. Now, Navajo Nation is not a member, but you could very easily find their website and a lot of information about Navajo, because they are certainly geographically the largest tribe in the United States. Population-wise, I believe Cherokee has more members, but they are still one of the largest and most influential tribes in the US, Navajo. But going through these pages at this link, you can find these different little blurbs, give you a brief about the community, give you some contact information, usually tribal council secretary and those sorts of folks, as well as a website, if in fact they have a web presence. Not every tribe has a web presence. Not every tribe has a very good website. As the owner of a not very good website, I understand how it becomes time consuming, and that might not be the thing that you are spending a lot of time on. But this is a great resource. ADOT publishes this page, Arizona Tribal Transportation. This can give you a lot of information, both about upcoming events, and we're going to talk about networking and how important that is to the process of you winning tribal work. But this is the website at the bottom of the page, and you can see how very comprehensive this website is, from talking about tribal transportation policies and statutes to lists of resources to, again, you can find a list of Arizona tribes. You can see some studies and plans that have been done, so you can see who's done what studies, who are prime contractors working with tribes, who are subbing to those primes, and where might we be at in a process if certain studies and plans have been done for various tribes. So it's a great website. I encourage you to check it out. They keep it very current. And we'll talk more about some of these upcoming events. So finding tribal contract work. So again, I'm going to encourage you to develop a research, outreach, and marketing strategy. And so I'm just going to share how I've gone about this and talk a little bit about how you may want to go about this. So really starting with the research. So looking at a list of tribes, learning about those tribes, figuring out, do those tribes maybe have a casino? If you're a window washing business, they've got a lot of windows. That might be an opportunity for you. Now you need to learn who to contact and check out the website, see if they're publishing RFPs, or call them directly or email somebody directly and find out if they are, in fact, hiring window washers or carpet cleaners or whatever it is that is the service that you provide. So again, do your homework, do this research. Tribal websites, I've given you a link where you can find a lot of tribal websites in one fell swoop. And then not all tribes publish their meeting minutes, but occasionally you can find them online. And where available, there is just nothing more informative about what is going on in this moment with a tribe than to see what's going on with their tribal council. And so I would encourage you definitely to take a look at tribal websites. And from there, what I've done historically is I look at a lot of these tribal grantee lists, like the one I shared with you. And then I develop a capability statement that is relevant to the kind of work I'm trying to pursue. So here you see a 2-page capability statement that I've developed for my firm, and I'm not expecting you to try to read this. I'm just going to point out some things about what I've done here. So this is me talking about writing tribal safety plans. And I use this to try to win more work, to write more tribal safety plans. Writing more tribal safety plans leads to writing more grants, leads to planning and design projects, leads to other projects with tribes. And so this is a way that I've gotten my foot in the door. So I wrote this tribal safety plan capability statement. This is several years old now, but in any case, I list services and tasks I provide over and above just safety plans. a partial list of my obviously tribal clients, and then some representative projects. And if those projects turns it into grants, how much were those grants for and what were they for? And then my contact information, of course. Now, using this method, so for example, just to share with you what happened with me and the Pueblo de Cochiti in New Mexico. So first I found the Tribal Transportation Program Safety Funds grantee list that looks just like the one that you received as a handout. I believe it was probably the one from 2015 or 2016. I went through, I identified tribes in Arizona, Alaska, California, and New Mexico that I was interested in working with. I am a DBE in Arizona, Alaska, California, and New Mexico. That's why I chose those from the list. Then I made a spreadsheet and put in the contact information for those tribes. Then, taking this capability statement, I emailed a short, sweet, this is me, introduction, here's my capability statement. I see that you received these funds. Congratulations on the receipt of these funds from the Federal Highway Administration. I would like to speak to you further if you're interested in potentially contracting me to write your tribal safety plan. I don't know that that's exactly what I said, but it was something to that effect. I keep it very short. And I'm telling you, the day I sent it to the Pueblo de Cochiti, in 3 hours, I got a phone call. Now, is that going to happen every time? Absolutely not. But that was in December of 2016, and we are in June of 2022, and I'm on my 8th or 9th contract with them. So this is how you can get your foot in the door and you can keep winning work. So who should you contact? Because when you start looking at these websites, like I said, some are really great websites, some are nothing more than a landing page, really. And different tribes call their tribal departments by different names. Some have a business office, some call it the taxation office, some have TARO, some don't. Some have an economic development office, some have transportation, some don't. Some have transit, but not transportation, even though they're overlapping. Some have a planning department that does transportation and transit. Some have elderly services that's doing paratransit. Some have housing authorities, usually they're called in tribal communities. You don't usually find an engineering department. They're usually under the heading of planning, or they might be in the Department of Natural Resources. There are often community development departments, environmental departments. So you just have to look at the drop-down list to see what they're calling their various departments and figure out for each tribe, what that department is called. And don't be shy. If you're not sure who it is you need to reach out to, or you're calling and you're not getting an answer, then call the tribal secretary. She or he knows pretty much everything there is to know in that moment about what that tribe is doing and can tell you who you should call, or who never answers and call this person instead, even though the website says Joe Smith. So I'm going to go through these slides real quickly. I've done some of this research for you because it was my intent that you walk away today being able to hit the ground running. So here are several tribes on these next slides with links to their pages that are their solicitation pages. Now, not every tribe has solicitation pages and not every tribe is keeping them up, but I have provided those that I found of those in Arizona that have solicitation pages. So I'm just going to show you very quickly, flipping through these. Here's Cocopas. Here's Hopi tribes. Theirs is not current. Hualapai tribes is current. Pueblo Zuni. And now I want to take you to Indian Country Today because this is the premier newspaper, online newspaper for Native Americans across the United States. Now there are other Native American publications that are online. These guys are like the New York Times of Indian Country, which is why they're called Indian Country Today. In any case, their classifieds are great because you can find RFPs for right here in Arizona in this national newspaper. So here, this was from a couple of months ago, obviously it's over now, but in any case, you know, an RFP for Apache Gaming Enterprise looking for someone to help with their exploration and master land use plan. When you go to their classified page, this is what it looks like. And so here's the link to their classified page. And so you can see on their classified page, they're advertising both RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, and advertising just regular jobs for people in Indian organizations, as well as Native nations, you know, here at the bottom, looking for a construction project manager. And so sometimes when you see these classified ads where they're looking for an actual person, you know that they need that help. And you, as a construction project manager or a construction company, may reach out to them because they're in this moment of looking for help. And maybe there's an opportunity for you. So reading these things regularly can give you an idea of what you should be thinking about, who you might market to. So Vanessa Bell has asked, you know, I mean, I'm just sharing screenshots of things, and I started developing this PowerPoint a couple of months ago. If you go on Indian Country Today classifieds page, you're going to find things that are current. It doesn't mean that everything that's out there on the internet is expired. It's just that, you know, I couldn't go back and update every single page I screenshotted when I started working on this a couple of months ago. And I wanted to just provide you you know, links to where you can go find this stuff. But if you go to this link, you're going to find what's on there today. This is the Tribal Transportation Program Safety Funds landing page. So this is a program from Federal Highway Administration. Every year under what we knew as the FAST Act, 2% of the available tribal transportation program dollars, the entire budget of tribal transportation program dollars, are set aside to address transportation safety issues in Indian country. And so these funds are designed to develop tribal safety plans. They're designed to help tribes do crash data assessments, improvements and analyses, and they're designed to come up with systemic roadway departure countermeasures, as well as one of our favorite things, which are infrastructure improvements and other kinds of projects that are considered infrastructure improvements that 23 USC 148A(4) tells you all about and describes the latitude and limits of. And so this page is where that table that you received as a handout originates. And so I wanted to give you this website and then take you to the bottom portion of this page, which I couldn't screenshot the whole page and have you actually be able to see what it says. But when you look down on this page, you'll see the recent announcement. The document that you have as a handout is this fiscal year 2021 Tcpsf grant recipients. So this is the list of tribes that just won this money on May 4th. So that's just about as current as it gets with the federal government in terms of these people just won this money. You can see the projects for which they won this money. You can see the dollar amounts, and you know that if they just learned of this on May 4th, pretty soon they're going to be issuing RFPs and RFQs looking for people to help them complete these projects that are on these tables that you're seeing. If you want to find further projects, these projects typically take 3 years if it's a safety plan project, up to 5 years before you have to renew safety plans and update them. And 3 years at least for construction projects. When you go to the bottom of this page, our prior year lists of grant recipients going back to, I think, probably 2013. So again, this is the link to that page. You can find many more tables like the one that was a handout I provided you today, but you can take this table today and begin marketing to tribes that are going to be doing these projects that you see on this table. So again, here are the 2 handouts that I've shared with you. And you can see as you go down the first page, because we're Arizona, at the bottom of the first page are grantees from Arizona that won these funds. And you can see some of them won some pretty big money for projects. Okay, so another source where you can find large scale infrastructure and other type of projects in the same fashion is looking at lists of grantees that have come out from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, for Indian Community Development Block Grants. So I'm sure most of you have heard of community development block grants, which your town or city or county has been pursuing for decades. This is the same pot of money at its original source at HUD. And so here in the state of Arizona, when we go to the Department of Housing to get this money in Arizona to these communities, these are pass-through monies from HUD at the federal level to the state level, and then they go out to communities. In this case, tribes can go straight to the federal government because they're sovereign nations and apply for these dollars. And you will see at this link, going back a couple of years, these lists of who the grantees have been and get an idea of who are doing large scale projects that you might have an interest in. So here are the fiscal year 20 Icdbg grantees. And you can see for Arizona, Navajo, Tohono O'odham, Tonto Apache, White Mountain Apache Housing Authority received some pretty big dollar grants to do various projects. And so at this point, if you were interested in any of these things, because these were fiscal year 20 grants, some of these things may already be in process, but we also know what's been happening since this pandemic hit, which is that everything has slowed down. And not only has everything slowed down, supplies and materials for construction have skyrocketed in price and become difficult to acquire. So even though these are fiscal year 2020 projects, we don't even know if the RFPs have been issued and or if any of these projects have broken ground, might just be barely in the EA stage. So again, these grantee lists give you an idea of who maybe you start to reach out to first and why it makes sense to reach out to them. And you can ask them very specifically, after congratulating them first on the receipt of this money, if they need some help with the implementation of getting these projects on the ground. Okay, so that's some of the techniques, for finding tribal contract work online, and gets you away from just cold calling people with no plan. You want to have a plan. Do your research, align who you are and your mission with tribes in your area, or if you want to go, all over the state or beyond the state. If you have that latitude, you can design your networking approach to them, your marketing approach to them, to be much broader than Arizona, if that's your sphere of influence. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about winning work via networking, because this is one of the big ways that I win work, where I just show up and do speaking engagements. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these or the details of all of these, because of time, and I want you guys to have some time for questions, and I have several more slides yet, so I'm going to click through these quickly. This is the website for the American Indian Chamber of Commerce. They rotate their monthly meetings. They've been online, I think. I'm not sure if they're still online, but they have pretty cheap membership, and you can get on their agenda as a speaker, which is a great opportunity to get your face in front of tribes and tribal organizations and speak to them about what you do and your recent projects. I highly recommend this organization. They typically, when they were meeting in person, would rotate their meetings to different tribal casinos and that sort of thing. And this is their page about members and why you want to be a member, or you can just sign up, as I have done, to get their e-newsletter and keep up on events they do and seminars and webinars and when they have their meetings. This event, I'm so in love with this event because I began attending this event in 2011 as a speaker. I've gone almost every year since 2011, tried to be on the agenda. I wasn't the last 2 years virtually, but starting 3 years ago, I got on their planning committee. And I will be speaking at this conference this year. This is usually 300 to 500 tribes, many attendees, federal government employees from Federal Highway Administration, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Navajo Nation DOTs, tribal leaders, tribal transportation planners, architects, designers, construction. They have an equipment rodeo if you want to go drive some big stuff and win a belt buckle. I think we're giving away this year. This is the first time we'll be in person with the conference. It is in Louisville. I highly recommend it. When I decided I wanted to work in Alaska, I went to this conference. That was how I won work in Alaska. I began working in Alaska in 2015 and did 3 straight years of work all over the state of Alaska because I attended this conference in Alaska. And that was how I began to get my foot in the Alaska door. And to prove to people that even though I live in a hot, dry state, I can learn about and talk about permafrost and off ice all day long once I know about it, and I can help you even though I live someplace that looks very different and actually has sun all the time. So I really recommend these networking opportunities. It's how you meet people. Again, it's how you get your face in front of people. And even better, you can be a sponsor. Yes, that costs a little more money, depending on the size of if you just want to sponsor coffee at lunch to having a booth and that kind of thing. Here's the link to get the sponsorship packet for this year's event. And here is the event registration for sponsors and the link for that. If you are in fact interested, the cheapest way to attend this conference is to be a speaker, because then you don't have to pay the registration fee, which is why I like being a speaker. This organization is having a meeting tomorrow. If you're interested in just sitting in on a virtual meeting tomorrow and getting a feeling about a tribal organization and getting your face in front of somebody as quickly as tomorrow, I can provide the information. I didn't get it until after 5 yesterday, so it did not get in this PowerPoint. Their website is basically just the landing page you see here, so you won't find information about their meetings. But if you want that information, drop a note in the chat, or I'll just email the information for the meeting tomorrow to everybody that's been here today. But this is their website. Again, it doesn't provide that much information, but once you learn who the contact people are, then you can keep up with that. They do have this Facebook page. They haven't updated since November, but when they're updating it, then you can see where their meetings are. But again, I can make the information about tomorrow's virtual meeting available. They do have a mid-year meeting this summer that will be virtual that you can participate in. And then they have an annual meeting that will be in Vegas in December this year that you can also participate in. Okay, so I will share the information with Rebecca. She can make sure that everybody that participated with this gets this information about the meeting tomorrow. COGS, the councils of government, or our associations of government, Pima County Association of Government, Maricopa Association, County Association of Government. Get involved in these meetings, because tribes come to these meetings too, not to every meeting, but here's NACOG's Transportation Technical Subcommittee. Right now, as we speak, they're meeting today. If you're really excited and want to jump on that meeting as soon as we're done at 10:30, here's the information to go get on that virtual meeting today. Here's their upcoming meeting dates on the left. It's a way to, have your foot in that door and regularly be talking to tribes about the kinds of transportation projects that they're putting together and where they are at with things. And you can meet transportation planners and sometimes tribal leaders at these kinds of meetings. All right, case studies. We'll get back to that in just a second. I want to go ahead and finish up here, but I'm going to pose this question about what your firm's tribal work experiences have been, because I want some of you to share, if you're willing to, those of you who said you've worked with tribes. And then at this point, we can open it up to questions. And but I also want to share, you can type those in the chat. And but I want to share this link, because I hope all of you will go to this link when we finished and filled out this questionnaire, And, because my trainings are really important to me, and working with ADOT, I have many years of experience working with ADOT, and it's important to me how I'm seen to them as well. So if you would evaluate this webinar today, but also at the end of it, we're asking you to comment and select some topics that you want us to cover next week on Thursday at the Navigating the Ins and Outs of Tribal Contracts and Procurement workshop. So we will spend a lot of time hands-on with procurement documents, tribal procurement documents, and tribal contracts, and kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of that. But I also want to cover things that I might have missed today that are burning concerns that you have, or other things that you want to know. So, so Q&A is open now. And Rebecca has sent a note that she's happy to send out tomorrow's meeting information about the ITA stuff, along with the slide deck. It will be a PDF, but it does have all the links. You should be able to go to them. Here's the post-survey event, the event survey, the evaluation that I've just been speaking of. So with that, let's take the next few minutes for questions. Or if anybody wants to share about their experience in working with tribes, I can, if you raise your hand, it looks like I have the ability to allow you to talk. Is that correct, Rebecca?
You are correct, yes. If anybody
Okay.
uses the raise hand function, Misha or I can allow you to talk.
Okay, so I don't know why I'm not seeing the raise hand function on my toolbar anymore. Oh, there's one. Okay. All right. So, Angela.
Great presentation. I enjoyed every bit of it. I learned a lot. I'm DBE and Icdbg and SBE certified. And so my question is, I monitor federal contracts. Anybody who receives federal money must comply with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. They must at least try to do outreach to minorities, people of color. So does that apply to the tribes as well in terms of their contracts? Do they monitor tribal participation? And if so, do you know what software they use?
Well, I definitely couldn't answer what software they use. That would be a question you'd have to ask their IT departments, because their IT is all over the map. I mean, some tribes have very sophisticated IT, and some tribes have, a guy who does 3 other jobs that's also the IT guy. So that I couldn't answer. You would have to contact the tribe's IT people individually to learn that. The larger, broader question is, and it's not a simple answer because, again, this is federal Indian law. But yes, they are trying to parse and walk the lines of all these different federal legislations. So they are not in general in the business of discriminating. That being said, they do Indium Preference. They have the right to do Indium Preference, and that doesn't violate Title VII or any of the civil rights legislation that we've done in this country. It's just as we need that civil rights legislation for people of color and minorities of all types, people with disabilities and other things, to level the playing field for everyone. Tribes are using Indium Preference so that their people have that same opportunity. That being said, I'm not familiar with them discriminating against any particular group. And yes, they have to do a lot of federal monitoring. I don't see DBE cited specifically in their RFPs that they issue, unless because it's federal money, they have to do that. But I do see that occasionally, particularly with the transit dollars and RFPs they issue that are funded under federal transit dollars. So I don't know that I've answered that all that well, Angela. I would say if you have more specific questions, contact the tribe you have that question about, and they can tell you more about how they handle monitoring and compliance and that sort of thing internally. Does that help?
Yes, that was a big help. Because the monitoring, we do software too. So we have a software program that can help them monitor their participation. So they'll be able to know on this particular contract, we had 1% participation, and the software allows them to break it out by ethnicities. And also it has a component that monitors via the federal government requirements, DOT's requirements, and FHWA and FTA. So that's why I was asking.
That's a great ticket in the door. So Angela, market the heck out of that, especially to IT people at Tribes, because if there's something that can streamline their process, I don't know what you're charging. If it's, a lot of money, you might not get a lot of takers, but, in any case, they may even have some kind of grant funding they could use that would pay for that. So, I think that sounds like a great tool and could really be of great help to Tribes. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Less than $10,000. So
Sweet. Okay, that should be affordable for most, especially since we're in this moment when money's raining from the sky, right?
yes.
Okay, Michelle Cochran, you had a question?
Hi, I'm Michelle. My business is 626 LLC. We're a distributor of promotional products.
Okay.
And I have been working with the Yaqui tribe down in Tucson.
Pasquayaki?
Yaqui, and the Tika group, which is the tribal attorneys. And one of my contacts went up to the Navajo Nation. I've been having trouble getting approved as a vendor because they want qualifications from Native American stuff. So I was just wondering, is there a way to get approved through the diverse purchasing? Can we use that as a way to get in the door?
I can't speak to how you go about that with Pasquayaki. I would look and find out if they have a business office, a taxation office, even HR maybe. If you can't get answers from any of those, maybe reach out to the tribal secretary and pose your question and say, who do you suggest I talk to?
Okay.
Again, because they're unique, I can't give you a one size fits all sort of answer, to, call this person kind of thing. And we are in a moment of a lot of turnover. So it's quite often that I look at a website and that individual is not still there. But you can always call the main tribal number and say, I'm trying to reach this individual, and they will tell you, that individual is no longer still here, talk to so-and-so. That's going to require you reaching out directly to them to get that answered.
Thank you. And then I wanted to mention that regarding payment, sometimes I have a challenge collecting before 60 or 75 days. Other times they pay within 10 days. So it just depends on who's monitoring the purchase order system and how it gets processed, I think.
Finance departments, because they are small and again have a lot of turnover, it can be all over the map. But I've not waited that long personally for payment. So again, as I said, I try to find out. I want to know all the staff in your finance department. I want to know all of them. I want to know their emails. I want to know their phone numbers. I want to be their friends. That being said, within reason, so you're not trespassing certain ethical lines, so to speak. But I try to find out who those individuals are, so I have my person that I can contact. And like I said, when I invoice that person at finance. So I don't know if that would be helpful to you or if you're already doing that. But I would encourage you with tribes where you've had that challenge to do that next step of learning who's in there and not even who you thought was in there 2 years ago or last year or 6 months ago, who's in there now and who is the person that takes that call, because maybe this person's just processing checks, but they're in finance. That's not the person you want. You want the person who's looking at the POs and the checks and the authorizations, you know, and all that stuff. And then you can reach out to them, but, you know, become their friend. And you know, that is the way I have kept it streamlined, if that's helpful.
Thank you so much.
Merwin Yellowhair. I'm trying to unmute. Okay, Merwin, it's open. You can speak now. Did you have a question? Mr. Yellowhair, you had your hand up.
Hey, Misha, this is Rebecca. We also have a question in the Q&A from Sonia. So Merwin,
Okay.
if you
I will go. I'm just pulled that up right when you said that, Rebecca. All right, so Sonia's question is, do you have a starting point or contact group for East Coast American Indian tribes? Talk to me in 2 weeks, Sonia. I'm going to Erie, Pennsylvania, and we'll be interacting directly with Seneca Nation people out of upstate New York. And I don't remember the name of the other tribe. I think they're also from New York. I don't know a lot of East Coast tribes, no. I do know at least one contractor from back there. So, you know, shoot me an email after I've been to Erie, Pennsylvania, which will be the 14th through the 17th, and I'll see who I've gotten to know and if there's other people I could direct you to. Okay, let's see, who else do we have in? All right, so Merwin, are you still with us? I've unmuted you if you still have a question. Is there anyone else with a question? We have a few minutes left. Angela, you had your hand up. Angela, go ahead.
Okay, it's a question in terms of certification for the tribal certification. Do you know if they have that online or is it all paper?
So there's many kinds of certification. When you say tribal certification,
As like, for example, if you were Navajo and you weren't living on the reservation, but you wanted to show that you are Navajo and you want to apply for one of the grants that had that specific clause in it, what certification is it? Just the tribal card that they need to show that they are of a particular tribe?
without seeing these documents, it's hard to answer this question, Angela. I think I would need to see the document and you know, you could certainly email me something that you're looking at and maybe I could answer better. Typically, a tribal identification card is how tribal members are able to prove their tribal enrollment, like for if they go to the polls to vote, for example, or in other settings where they may need to prove their tribal enrollment. I don't know. I'm not an enrolled tribal member, so I can't tell you all the paperwork you receive when you become an enrolled tribal member. But certainly most tribes have an enrollment department that is enrolling, you know, people are born all the time.
Okay.
And they can tell you what that process is and they can tell you what paperwork's associated with it. And again, I would have to see what you're looking at before I could speak to that more thoroughly. And I would always encourage you to call the tribe or the institution that is issuing this paperwork and ask them those questions.
The reason I'm asking is we do certification software for DOT. When you apply for your Icdbg, Dbe, and Sbe, all the other BE certifications, you're actually using that software. And so we want to actually take it and use it for and create it where the tribes could use it for their certifications so they could network with each other. So that's why I was asking, because I'm trying to figure out what kind of documentation we would need to incorporate. Because right now you can just upload whatever documents you have. So that's why I was asking what specific documents so we could look into how we could set up a demo so they could see how it works.
Okay, so we're talking about tribal certification as a DBE firm. Is that correct?
Yes,
And,
that
and
is-
adding something that's more tribal specific into the existing DOT system.
yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. I still can't answer your deeper questions there, but I would talk to, you might call somebody like Navajo's enrollment department because they're big, right?
Okay.
They've got people who are, trying to be small business owners and stuff. And if because it is big, you don't find somebody or they, start running you around, then just look online at Arizona Tribes and look for their enrollment department folks and see what they can tell you about the paperwork. And I would maybe call them and then email them a link to this software, to this ADOT, so they can see it, because visual is very important, and to help them understand why you're asking these questions, because enrollment can be a very sensitive issue for tribes, and talking about enrollment and their methodology for enrollment can be very, very sensitive because of the history of the federal government's use of blood quantum and forcing tribes to use blood quantum as a way to determine who should be enrolled in federal programs and who should have scholarship money and all these kinds of things. So it's a very loaded topic. So, tread carefully, do your research, call your enrollment people, express that you're learning, express your goal in this, and that you're not trying to find out all about what that tribe's enrollment process is or the politics of that. You want to know for this larger goal of serving all of these tribes through the DOT. Does that make
Perfect.
sense?
Yes, that's exactly what I needed. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Sonia has a question. Pre-COVID, every year there was a gathering in Arizona of 520 plus recognized tribes. Good idea for networking, or is it a taboo? And when is the next one? Well, first I would have to know the name of said gathering because we have powwows all over the nation all the time. I'm not aware of one in particular in Arizona. I'm aware of several that used to take place annually. The most famous in the United States is the powwow that takes place usually in April, I think, in Albuquerque, Gathering of Nations, I believe it's called. It wouldn't be taboo as a non-tribal member to go. It wouldn't be, powwows are kind of like going to the state fair, and yet, I mean, I don't want to devalue or debase them in that way. It's just big, it's just huge, it's just a lot of stuff and a lot of dancing and a lot of activities and a lot. So I wouldn't go just as me. In fact, I've never been to Gathering of Nations. I want to go, and I would never go just me. I would want to take somebody who has gone regularly and can help me have that experience in a really valuable and fun way. But if you're looking to win work, I don't know that a powwow kind of setting or this kind of setting is the best. There are numerous kinds of, like through the American Indian Arizona Chamber of Commerce, there are events that are specific to business networking. Tom and Michelle are trying to get maybe a tribal town hall. So when you're commenting, you guys, on your evaluation form, if you would like to have a tribal town hall that's sponsored by A.Dbe, and you think it would be really cool to have tribes in a room with you guys as DBE firms, then put that on the evaluation form at the very end and say you'd like to have that. So Sonia continues that question. Okay, wrong state, but what about contacting the planners? Yeah, I sit on two different planning committees. So planning committee for the National Transportation in Indian Country Conference that I showed you. And also we are planning a safety summit here, which I would encourage everybody here to attend if they can. It's supposed to be in early November, but we're still negotiating the venue and stuff because ADOT money doesn't come until the end of this month to pay for venues and things. So we're still working out the details of where, but look for this Injury Prevention and Traffic Safety Summit that will be an Arizona Tribal Safety Summit. And if you want to talk to a planner on that committee, that would be me. But as regards planners for a gathering of nation or big powwow kind of thing, if you can find that online, yeah, go ahead and reach out to them. I don't know how responsive they would be. If it's a regular tribal conference, it's a tribal business related conference, and you reach out to somebody on the planning committee, then yeah, you're likely to get an answer. So I hope those are helpful. Anybody else? Mr. Yellowhair, your mic is still open if you have a question yet. Anybody else? We are just at 10:32 and I don't want to keep people too long. Please come back again next Thursday. Oh, Mr. Yellowhair, did you want to go ahead? Did you have a question? I'm looking back through the chat. I think you had something in the chat here. Relevant to construction in AZ, look into CIIC. If your mic is still open, I think it is. Can you tell us what CIIC is?
Hey, Misha, this is Rebecca. I actually know what CIIC is. That's the
Okay.
Construction in Indian Country.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I am familiar with that. I just, the acronym was throwing me. So they have a conference. I don't know when their next one is. I want to say a couple of years ago when we were still in person, it was like in August. That's a good conference to attend. And yes, you can reach out to the planning people of that conference and get information. And I would look for them online and see if they're doing a conference. I haven't been to that conference. I've wanted to go, but they usually have a great agenda. Okay, I'm looking back to see, I don't think we missed any other questions. Mr. Yellowhair, it says you're still being muted. Let me look at that. I'm showing your mic open, Mr. Yellowhair. So if you have an additional question, go ahead. Okay, well, I don't want to keep folks. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to email me at the email address on this screen. Or you can always give me a call at that cellular number, 928-369-8241. Please try to come back next Thursday if you can to join us. And if there's questions we haven't covered, we can try to cover them then. And thank you so much for the several comments and appreciation in the chat. And thanks to everybody for coming out today and for taking this time.
Absolutely. Fantastic job, Misha. That was very, very informative. And I love that you just share everything you know, like all the good stuff. So,
well, I could go on all day, but unfortunately, there's a time limit. And Merwin, I just wanted to say, I see your last question about taking my DBE company as prime to get the ADOT job. Give me a call and I'm happy to talk about that to you. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thanks so much for coming out. Come out again next Thursday and join us. Take care.
Just kind of wrapping up, I will turn the stage over to Amy for just a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dbes update. But before I do that, I will say we will send out all the slides. Misha has been gracious enough to provide a PDF file. Misha, if you can send me the link for tomorrow's event that everybody seems very interested in, I will include that. And please do be sure to take our post-event survey. So the evaluation form that has the all the questions and all the kind of the guidance on how we can make next week's workshop much better. So with that, Amy, do you have some Dbes updates for us?
I do, thank you. First, I just want to thank Misha. You provided a lot of great information on how to win and find tribal work, as well as breaking down those barriers. So thank you so much for presenting today. As Misha said as well, please join us next week on the 9th for a follow-up task force workshop. I'm sure there will be more Q&As during that workshop as well, and more time to converse about what Misha has provided to us today. And then finally, just save the date. We have started planning for our DBE Small Business Transportation Expo. That will be August 10th. This year's theme is Advancing Arizona Transportation. Attendees will learn about project opportunities, network with industry professionals and business owners, and hear from transportation leaders. So I did put the link to register in the chat. So please get out there and register. It's going to be another great event. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. We hope to see you next week.